conceptions of the body are in relation with the living beings. The living being has a spiritual form beyond this gross material or subtle psychic existence. The gross body and psychic functions cease to act as soon as the living being leaves the visible gross body. In fact, we say that the living being has gone away because he is unseen and unheard. Even when the gross body is not acting, when the living being is in sound sleep, we know that he is within the body by his breathing. So the living beings passing away from the body does not mean that there is no existence of the living soul. It is there, otherwise, how can we repeat his births again and again? The conclusion is that the Lord is eternally existent in his transcendental form, which is neither gross nor subtle like that of a living being. His body is never to be compared to the gross and subtle bodies of the living being. All such conceptions of God's body are imaginary. The living being has his eternal spiritual form, which is conditioned only by his material contamination. Thus in the Lakshminath report, So, we are continuing to see the descriptions of how a living entity perceives gross and subtle matter without perceiving the existence of the soul. In the previous class, we understood about how the living being understands the existence of the body, the gross body, and in this verse, the existence of subtle body, which is beyond the gross body, is being described here. Adam param in avyaktam. Vyakti means person, avyakti means something which is not person. Here proper translates this word is unmanifested. Beyond this gross conception of form is the subtle conception of form. And how does one realize the subtle conception of form? As that which does not have a formal shape, it cannot be seen, and this is how one can perceive the existence of the subtle form. Avyuda guna brahmitam. And what is the nature of that particular subtle form? It is influenced by the three gunas, the sattva guna, rajoguna and tamoguna. Guna brahmitam. Adrishta shruta. Adrishta, drishti means to see. Adrishta means that which cannot be seen. Ashruta, shruta means heard, that which cannot be heard of. Adrishta shruta vastutvat. The nature of that is adrishta and ashruta. So that is why we can see here adrishta shruta vastutvat. Sajivo yat punarbhavaha. But the living entity, the jiva, is beyond the subtle. And the nature of subtle is that which is avyuda, adrishta. Avyuda means which does not have any form. It is adrishta, which cannot be seen, and ashruta, which cannot be heard. The living entity, because he is beyond all of these things, what happens to him? Punarbhavaha. Punarbhavaha means he takes birth again and again. So the subtle form is being described here, apart from the gross form. In today's world, in the modern scientific world perspective, psychology is considered a branch of science by many scientists. But there are also a group of scientists who believe that psychology is not science, it's more of philosophy. Because psychology deals with subtle matter. And science has not understood subtle matter. Sukshma Sharira. It is not understood. They believe that gross matter manifests consciousness. So in the early 60s, there were two scientists, Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga. There are two scientists. And these two scientists studied a patient who has under severe epilepsy. You know what is epilepsy? The nervous breakdown. The nerves don't coordinate the body well. It's epilepsy. So he had to undergo a procedure where there is a portion of the brain. You know, our brains are made up of two hemispheres, the right and the left. The right brain and the left brain. There are two portions of the brain. And the right portion of the brain is responsible for certain functions, and the left portion of the brain is also responsible for certain other functions. And connecting these two, the right and the left, is a region called corpus callosum. It connects the two portions of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain deals with language, logic, and speech. The right portion of the brain handles vision, visual tasks, spatial tasks. It understands space. You know, sometimes when you're walking, some people can remember, let us say you're in an unknown city. You are reaching, let us say you're visiting the nearest ISKCON temple. And you're walking, you found the Google map and you heard that, it's close by. And you walk around the place and then you find the temple. Some people can very easily remember the route. That means he has good spatial memory. He grasps about how the space is, how the surroundings are. Usually architects have good spatial intelligence. They can understand space better, how to optimize the space. So that is handled by the right hemisphere of the brain. A right hemisphere is also associated with intuition, correct? Intuition, emotion, face recognition, all of these things in the right hemisphere of the brain. So these two scientists, they studied a person who had epilepsy, and the treatment, there is no treatment for epilepsy, at least in the 1960s. So what they did was, they removed a portion of the brain where this epilepsy is getting triggered every time for the patient. And what is the portion they removed? The portion that connects the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. It's called corpus callosum. And the moment they removed, both hemispheres were disconnected. There is no communication between the right and the left hemispheres. So they conducted a lot of experiments on this patient and discovered something very startling. What they did was very simple. They actually covered the right visual input. They covered his right visual input because the way the brain functions is, all the left visual inputs is handled by the right hemisphere. All the right visual inputs are handled by the left hemisphere. That's the way the brain is designed. So they covered all the right visual inputs for this person. And do you know what interestingly happened? There was an object which is placed in front of him, a visual, an object. And he could see using his left eye, his right portion was covered, left eye he could see the object. And the right hemisphere has perceived that object. It has seen that object. And when asked about the description of the object, can you describe this object? This person could not describe the object. He said, I don't know what this object is. Because, you know why? His right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, which is meant for, the right hemisphere, which is meant for visual, is not able to grasp this. Is not able to understand. But on the other hand, if you tell him to draw the object, he immediately draws the object. Suppose, say, for example, the object is a pen. He can draw a pen, but he cannot speak about the pen. That means what? His doing, which is associated with the left hemisphere, is triggered, but the right hemisphere, which involves speech and description, the left hemisphere, which involves speech and description, is not triggered. That means there is no communication between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. So in other words, this person has two personalities. The personality which speaks and the personality which does. There is no correlation between the two. One personality understands this object, one personality does not understand the object. So the scientists concluded that consciousness of a person is originating from the brain. Because the corpus callosum was removed, there are two consciousness functioning within his brain. It seems so clear, such a strong proof. So anybody will believe in it, isn't it? But here, the Vedic scriptures say that we are not this body and neither are we the subtle body. We are something beyond that. How do we understand this? Scientists have evidence, they have proof saying that consciousness is directly connected with the brain. So we are all functioning because of the brain. So the proclamation of the Vedic literature may not be true. So how do we understand all of these things? Is there a correlation between the consciousness and the brain, like the scientists proclaim? Or like the Bhagavad Gita says, we are beyond the subtle and the gross matter, which is true. Apparently what the scientists are saying appears to be very true. Isn't it? There is evidence here. So let us try and understand this. There are personalities in history, and it's not very old history, it's recent history. About 150 years back, there was a great devotee of the Lord. And this devotee appeared in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And this devotee's name, this Acharya's name, is Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. You know, we offer our praise to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. What is the prayer we offer? Namo Gaur Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye. He was a Vairagya Murti. He was known for his renunciation. He has renounced his gross body and he's renounced the subtle body as well. And how he used to live? He used to, feed off the dry rice which is left. He used to wash it with Ganga water, offer it to the Lord like this, and he used to have it. Whenever there is a dead body floating on Ganga, they wrap the dead body with a cloth. He used to take that cloth and wrap it around his body. He never cared for name, fame, emotions, none of this. He had a different state of consciousness. And this state of consciousness is what made him a Vairaghi. Vairagya Vidya Nijabhakti Yoga. He was practicing Nijabhakti Yoga. Why? Because of his ability to renounce both gross and subtle body. So this was the glory of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Therefore is glorified as Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralam Barasambode Pada Mujayate Nama. So this is the quality of a person who has renounced both gross and subtle matter. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks a question to Krishna. Arjuna asks Krishna, what is this quality of a person who has gone beyond matter, both gross and subtle matter? How does this person talk? You know, the scientists were trying to understand about speech, how speech is correlated with certain portions of the brain. But here is a person who has gone beyond gross and subtle matter. And what is the nature of the person how does he speak? Sthita prajnasya kavasa samadhistasya keshava sthitadi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. Arjuna is asking Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness has thus merged in transcendence? He's transcendental to the gross and the subtle body. How does he speak? Here is an evidence. What is his language? You see the patient, he could not speak because his right brain was not triggered. He could not speak. But Krishna is asking, Arjuna is asking Krishna, a person who is beyond gross and subtle matter, how does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? It is interesting, On one hand, we can see scientists who have proved that brain is associated with consciousness. That is where the consciousness is emerging from. On the other hand, there are personalities who have demonstrated Vairagya Vidya, and they have gone beyond gross and subtle matter, and they also talk, they also speak. It looks like this is not originating from brain. It looks like that, isn't it? But these personalities had gross body. They had the brain. So do you think the brains are not functioning just because somebody has gone beyond the gross and subtle matter? So how do we understand this in the Vedic context? In reply to this, Krishna says, a person who's gone beyond the gross and subtle matter, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya devinaha rasavarjyam rasopyasya param drishva nivartate. Krishna says, the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, which is gross and subtle enjoyment. He may be restricted from that. Just like Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He was restricted from gross and subtle enjoyment. How? By experiencing a different state of consciousness, which is beyond the gross and subtle matter. So Krishna talks about what is this gross matter and what is the subtle matter in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme dhinna prakriti rashtada. Krishna says that earth, water, fire, air, ether. Ether is that element, it's not the chemical ether. Ether is that which carries sound. So it's called Kam Mano Buddhirevacha. So earth, water, fire, air, and ether is what constitutes gross matter. Apart from this, Mano Buddhirevacha, Manas, Buddhi, and Ahankara. These three forms the subtle matter, subtle consciousness. Just like in a computer, you have the hardware and the software which drives the hardware. The software that drives our body are manas, buddhi and ahankara. These are the softwares which drives the body. And it is described in the Bhagavad Gita how a living entity gets this body and how the mind is responsible for the kind of body one gets. Prabhupada in another place says, if a person has the mentality of a cat or a dog, he's bound to get the body of a cat or a dog in the next life. So Krishna says that Shrotram Chakshu Sparshanam Cha Asanam Granameva Cha Adhisthaya Manaschaya Vishayan Upasevate. The living entity takes a gross body, but what kind of a gross body? You see, all of us have different bodies. We have different fingerprints. Our retinas are designed differently, and there are scanners to scan retina. Correct? Our eyes. So everybody's body is different. The way our nose is shaped is different. The way our lips are shaped are different. The way our ears are shaped are different. But who defines all of these things? What are there rules governing how we look? Are there rules governing our psychological state of consciousness? Yes, there are. So Krishna says, what are those rules? Krishna says, the living entity takes a gross body, obtains a certain type of a ear, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. He says it's grouped about the mind. Mind is very, very important subtle element which goes on to define the personality of a person, the consciousness of a person. If in our life, if one has developed sattvic qualities, sattvic qualities like tolerance, patience, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, these are all sattvic qualities. Anybody who has developed these sattvic qualities, his state of mind is what? Sattvic in nature. And according to the development of this consciousness, correct, where mind plays a very important role, he gets a corresponding body in the next life. So, body and mind are correlated like this. The kind of consciousness that we cultivate in our life defines the next body. If somebody has developed Krishna consciousness in this life, he is bound to get a spiritual body in the spiritual world. And where are all this consciousness developed? Krishna says this consciousness is developed in the mind. But in the previous verse we saw, mind is material. So mind is matter. So how do we understand the whole ecosystem that Krishna has designed around us? The ecosystem of this body. How is this body functioning? There are chemicals which are being triggered. Suppose somebody is happy, there are happiness producing chemicals. Somebody is in stress, there are stress chemicals. Isn't it? So it appears like we are made of chemicals. But Krishna is saying something else. Krishna is saying we are also made of mind. And our body that we get is grouped about the mind, the kind of body that we get. How do we reconcile all of these things? So, to reconcile all of these things, we should understand how this body, mind, intelligence and ahankara functions. It's a very important, and it is described by Prabhupada in various purports. It is also described by Lord Krishna in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. What is the role of subtle body? What is the role of gross body? And how are they correlated? It is described that mind is an emotional body. In one of the purports, Prabhupada says that mind is an emotional body. All our emotions of love, care, affection, all of these things is stored in the mind, is triggered by the mind. When somebody close to us passes away, we become emotional. People become emotional. They cry. And where are these emotions coming from? It's coming from the mind. If somebody shouts at you, you feel insulted, you feel very bad. Correct? It hurts. What is getting hurt? Your mind is getting hurt. So this is your emotional body. Then there is buddhi, intelligence. And what is the nature of intelligence? Intelligence seeks knowledge. It's a knowledge body. The knowledge that you have about the material world, the knowledge that you have from the scriptures, all of these things is there in the intelligence. And above the intelligence is called false ego. And false ego gives a sense of identity for you. How does people see me? What is my role? Like somebody may play the role of a husband, somebody may play the role of a manager, somebody may play the role of a wife, somebody may play the different roles we play in our lives. We play the role of a son. All of these identities is happening where? It is happening on the level of the false ego. A combination of all of these things, false ego, mind and intelligence, is what forms our personality. Just like a car has a carburetor, a car has an engine, a car has wheels. A combination of all these things which is what moves the car. Similarly, it is not that mind is functioning independently. It is not that intelligence is functioning independently. A combination of all these things is what is moving us. That is matter. Now, each one of this matter, the subtle matter, is connected with gross matter, and the subtle matter moves gross matter. If suppose I have a desire to move my hand, lift my hand, I'm able to move. But the desire to move my hand is coming from Sukshma Sharira, subtle matter. So subtle matter moves gross matter, and gross matter is made up of chemicals. Correct? Then what is the role of soul? Soul, it seems non-existent. If subtle matter is what I'm made up of, and gross matter is what I'm made up of, what is the role of soul? What is soul doing there? So it apparently looks like what Krishna is saying is false. So to clarify all this, scriptures go one level deeper. There is another interesting quality of the soul, very, very important for us to understand. It is said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Ananta Shakti Madhye Krishnera Tina Shakti Pradhana. There are three Shaktis of Krishna which are important, which are Pradhana. And because it is there in Krishna, it is also there in us. What are these three Shaktis which Chaitanya Charitamrita is talking about? There are three Shaktis called Ichcha Shakti, Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti. This Shakti, Ichcha Shakti means the Shakti to desire. Jnana Shakti means the Shakti which wants knowledge, which removes ignorance. We always want to be in knowledge. That Shakti is called Jnana Shakti. The third one is called Kriya Shakti, the ability to do certain things. So doing, knowing and desiring are the three qualities of the soul. If these three qualities of the soul are absent, just like in a dead body, these three qualities of the soul are absent, then what happens? The body does not move. So what drives fundamentally beyond the subtle body are these three Shaktis emanating from the soul. Ichcha Shakti, Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti. So our Ichcha Shakti, let us say we desire some certain things. The desire is what moves the subtle body, and subtle body moves matter. Correct? Then why is it so difficult to desire for Krishna? If the soul's nature is to desire, I'm desiring Krishna, I should be able to have darshan of Krishna, I should be able to be a Jivan Mukta. It is not so easy. Why? Because our desires, our jnana, our ichcha and our kriya are right now contaminated. It's just like this. Imagine you're wearing a gloves on your hand. The gloves takes the contour of your fingers, isn't it? And if you move the fingers, the gloves also moves. So it may look like the gloves are moving and the fingers are hidden. But actually what is moving the gloves? It is the finger. Similarly, when there is Atma leaves the body becomes dead. It is immovable. But what is actually in the body was Atma, which has the qualities of Ichcha, Jnana and Kriya. Because of these three Shaktis, it is moving matter. But these three Shaktis are contaminated by what is described in the Bhagavatam as contaminated consciousness. There is consciousness in matter and there is consciousness of the original self. The consciousness of the original self is covered by the false consciousness created by material prakriti, just like the gloves covering the fingers. Just like the gloves cover the fingers are moving, but it will look like the gloves are moving. Similarly, the Atma, the soul, which has Jnana, Kriya and Ichcha Shakti, is actually moving matter, but it is covered by a contaminated consciousness. What is this contaminated consciousness? I am a man. I'm Indian. I belong to family, but a particular family. You know, some of the cars I've seen, Gurjar. You see? Gurjar family. Brahman will be written. At least here in North India, it's very prominent. The family I am from. This is all contaminated consciousness. This is not the original consciousness of the soul. This contaminated consciousness is produced by Prakriti, and Atma wears these gloves of contaminated consciousness and functions in this material world. And the moment the living entity desires certain things, let us say it desires to have certain things, let us say a material thing. The desire is emanating from contaminated consciousness, which is like the gloves, and this contaminated consciousness triggers the particular chemical in the brain and the body functions. So this is the way to understand, this is the Vedic perspective of what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. So chemical stimulation is not untrue, it is true. It is true that we are driven by chemicals. It is true that we are driven by Prakriti. But all of these things are just like the gloves around our finger. It is just like the gloves around the soul. Moment you remove the gloves from your palm, the gloves does not move. Similarly, the body which is there, the subtle and the gross body which is there, are like the gloves. You remove the soul from the gloves, the body does not move. So all of these things we should understand. Now in the case of a pure devotee of the Lord, you have to understand a very, very important concept where matter behaves like spirit. Matter is originating originally from Krishna. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattas sarvam pravartate. Krishna says, I am the origin of both the material and the spiritual worlds. For Krishna, there is no difference between matter and spirit. In other words, matter has the capacity to behave like spirit, provided matter is used in the service of the Lord. Therefore, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj and all the Acharyas' body, although appearing like matter, they are spiritualized. because they are functioning in relationship with Krishna. Because they are functioning in relationship with Krishna, their body becomes spiritual. They have a brain which is functioning. They have body which is functioning. But all of those bodies, because it is used in the service of the Lord, gains a different quality. Another example, if there is a light, and if the light is covered by, let us say, a paper, the intensity of the light reduces, doesn't it reduce? Similarly, the body, the gross and the subtle body, covers the original potency of the soul to express jnana, ichcha and kriya freely. And when is jnana, ichcha and kriya expressed freely? When it is in relationship with Krishna. But now it is covered, and covered by contaminated consciousness. Let us take, for example, if the original color of the light is white, you put a thin film which is red in color, how will the light appear? It will appear red, isn't it? But is the original light red? It is white. Similarly, all the identities, I am a man, I am an Indian, I am a woman, are like that red light. The original light is white light. But the red light, the red film that is there, it is a contamination around the soul. So this is how the Vedic world, Vedic view of our existence is. And it is true. One can actually experience the soul. One can function on the level of the soul. And that is what Arjuna is asking Krishna. How does he speak? If this person, if the speech is a quality of gross body, how does a person who is transcendental to gross and subtle body speak? He speaks. He speaks the language of Krishna. He speaks the language of Krishna consciousness. He speaks the language of the Acharyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. All of those are recorded in Prabhupada's books. Anybody who speaks for Krishna, anybody who thinks about Krishna, anybody who has transcendental emotions and feelings for Krishna, he is said to be transcendental, although in the material body, because there is no difference between matter and spirit for a pure devotee of the Lord. Just like in the case of Krishna, because he uses matter in the service of Krishna. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prays, Janme Janme Prabhu se. He says, birth after birth, I want to be in this material world. Why does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desire birth after birth? He desires birth after birth because matter and spirit, there is no difference. This is called Achintya Veda Abhedatva. This is introduced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Otherwise, the general idea of renunciation is push away matter. That is not recommended by the Acharyas in the Parampara. The Acharyas in the Parampara say, Hari Sambandha Vastunaha, Mumukshubir Parityago, Palgu Vairagyam Tatyate. Anybody who renounces matter, thinking it is only matter, is a Palgu Vairagi, is a false Vairagi. A true Vairagi who is one who changes his perception, he changes his worldview by hearing from the Acharyas, and he sees that matter also has a Hari Sambandha. When he sees Hari Sambandha of matter with Krishna, the Hari Sambandha, when he establishes, matter no longer behaves like matter, matter behaves like spirit. That is how Jivan Muktas live. So this is a science. Krishna consciousness is a science. And the ABCD of that science is to understand that we are not this body. Neither are we the subtle body, but we are something beyond that. And there is a state of consciousness, a pure state of consciousness, the white light, the pure state of consciousness from which every one of us can function. And the process of removing that red light and allowing the original white light to come out, or in other words, the process of delinking ourselves from matter and spirit and awakening our original consciousness, is the process of Krishna consciousness. And one can attain this state of consciousness by the
sadhana program which Prabhupada has given in Kali Yuga. This process is easily achieved. This goal can be easily achieved. How? By chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Nataha paratara upaya. There is no other upaya. There is no other solution. Nataha paratara upaya. Sarva Vedeshu drishyate. This is the conclusion of the entire Vedic literatures. So therefore, chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra helps us to develop that state of consciousness from which one can function. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in one of the songs, he sings, Manasa Deho Geho Jo Kichu Mura Arpilutuva Pade Nandanishwara. The mind, body, intelligence, whatever is mine, my dear Lord, I offer it unto you. I want to use it for your service. My Ichcha, Jnana and Kriya is dedicated for you. The moment anybody says that, what happens? The Manas, which is matter, the Buddhi, which is intelligence, which is matter, the Deha, which is matter, Manasa Deho Geho, Jo Kichumora, whatever you have given me, the mind, the body, intelligence, I will use it in your service. The moment somebody uses mind, body, intelligence in the service of Krishna, he becomes spiritualized. He is no more in the material world. Although he may apparently be walking in the material world, he is no more in the material world. He is beyond this material world. That is what Arjuna asks Krishna. How does he walk? How does he talk? Now, how does he walk? How does he talk? Can be seen in Srila Prabhupada's life. That is how a Jivan Mukta walks. That is how a Jivan Mukta talks. His dealings. Today we have ample opportunity to associate with Prabhupada and understand about transcendental science, about transcendental consciousness, about transcendental personalities. We can understand that through the life of a pure devotee. So therefore, we must all read Srila Prabhupada's books, understand how he has led this world, understand the intentions of Prabhupada, understand what kind of dealings he had with other living entities, how he had spiritual compassion for other living entities. These are the state of consciousness that all of us have to aspire for as spiritual practitioners. What is our dealings with other living entities? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Nasochidana Samas Sarveshu Bhuteshu. He sees every living entity as equal. A friend, an enemy, everybody is equal. These are the lofty, big aspirations of the devotee. And we as practitioners of Krishna consciousness, we should understand all of these truths from Srila Prabhupada's words. So that is what is being described here in this particular verse. There is a description about the subtle matter, how the subtle matter covers the living entity. And here the Supreme Lord has no gross and subtle matter, because there is no difference between matter and spirit for the Supreme Lord. There is absolutely no difference. But in the case of living entity, there is a difference. We understand matter, we understand subtle matter, but the Supreme Lord is beyond subtle and gross matter. The living entity is also beyond gross and subtle matter, but because of contaminated consciousness, is covered by material Sukshma Sharira and the gross body. Sukshma Sharira, subtle body, and the gross body. And therefore, he suffers in this world. So once there is a very interesting analogy given by Prabhupada. So in Bengali, there is a saying about a ghost. A man haunted by a ghost. When he approaches a person, the tantric, he removes the ghost. And one of the process for removing the ghost is to throw mustard seeds on him. So Prabhupada says that it so happened that the ghost entered the mustard seed itself. So what happens when the ghost enters the mustard seed? You throw the mustard seed on the person, he will still be caught by ghost. Correct? So similarly, we are trying to solve the problems of the material world through technology. So many technological interventions and these big companies are all running. They're all busy solving problems of the material world or the material body. But what we should understand is that the ghost is in the mustard seed itself. Prabhupada says that the problem is not out there. We are using the body to solve the problems by working for different companies. But actually the problem is the body itself. The problem is the body itself. Why? The original light is covered. It is all red light. Correct? The red film is covering the light. So it is very, very important to understand the problem in the material world is the problem that is intrinsically there with the living entity. What is the problem? The soul is embodied in this trap of material body, which is made up of subtle and gross matter. And this solution is what Krishna consciousness is giving. It completely changes the perspective. So the Vedic perspective is a much more larger perspective. It understands the ecosystem of this material world much, much better. And people have, and the great kings of past have actually designed such ecosystems where spiritual knowledge, spiritual culture thrives. And today, although such cultures are not existing, Prabhupada has designed a movement. He's developed a movement where such spiritual culture is possible to cultivate. And therefore, Prabhupada founded this movement called ISKCON, where Prabhupada says the whole world can come here and live in this place and develop and revive their original Krishna consciousness. Correct? So that is what we can understand from today's session, and we'll continue further and understand what the discussion between Suta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya. We'll understand this further in the upcoming classes. With this, we'll stop here. Any question anybody has? Okay. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. So today is actually a very auspicious day. It is Ekadasi, and it's a very special Ekadasi. It is very important Ekadasi. Today we have 64 rounds of japa. So request all the devotees to take part in this. It's starting at 9 a.m. Thank you. Hare Krishna.